The purpose of this video is to discuss the POS Intra-Oral finishing plier and its use. They are sold individually or as a set of 4. The price is just a little under $400 for the set of 4. You can visit the Progressive Dental Supply website to see a very nice description of how to use the pliers and when and where each of them should be used. However, those words do not show you how to operate the plier clinically, so that's the purpose of this video. And before we start working on a typodont with our intraoral finishing pliers, I would like to introduce some basic wire bending skills that'll be very important when we use one of these pliers. So I will pick up this, which is a 1mm plier, and I'm going to show you the end right there. And how this is used is this. You will put this on the wire, and then what you see on this end facing you is what you're going to get on the wire that's on the inside of the arch where the teeth are. So you can tell yourself which way this is going to go by looking at that little step right there. And like any other type of wire bending exercise, you need to respect the instrument. And this is a stainless steel handle, and these are carbide blades that are silver soldered to the handle. So you want to work as close as you can to the center, which is where the hinge is. The further out to the edge you go, the bigger lever arm you have, and then you run the risk of having these beaks fail. The instrument is of course guaranteed, and they will replace it, but it's a hassle to have to go through that. So let us begin with some simple exercises. And when we bend a wire, the beak of the plier, remember you want to get as close as you can to the hinge, and you want it to be perpendicular to a tangent on the curve. Perpendicular to a tangent on the curve. So this is an easy one to see because the wire is straight right here, so that's a right angle between the wire and the beak of the plier. What's not so obvious is when you get into a curve situation, and this angle I have represented right here would be perpendicular to a tangent on the curve. And if you're unfamiliar with what I'm talking about, I'll place my handy plastic ruler on any point on the wire, and perpendicular to this tangent would be perpendicular to that ruler. So you'll just have to visualize that. So let's go make a couple of bends so that you can see what that looks like. And in this plane of space, this would be an up and a down bend. As we discussed a moment ago, what you see on this end of the plier right there is what you're going to get on that wire. Before I squeeze the handles together, I'm going to make sure that I'm perpendicular to a tangent on the curve and that I am horizontal, or as horizontal as I can be, with the occlusal plane. So in other words, you do not want this, you do not want this, you do not want this, you do not want that, or this, because those are all different things. Perpendicular to a tangent on the curve, parallel to the occlusal plane of the wire, and then you squeeze the beaks fully. And when you squeeze the beaks fully, what you're going to see in a moment is exactly what you see right here that's facing you, the operator. And there, you can see up against my finger, is a very nice 3/4 millimeter step bend. And if this were my lower left 5, it would be pushing the mesial aspect of that down. So the 4 was on this side, the 5 was on this side, and the 6 is back here. So we were stepping it down, perhaps. So the next step is easy. You simply take the plier and turn it over and go to the exact contact point on the other side, right between the 5 and the 6, as close as you can to the center of the plier, and then confirm that you're going to do the right thing. Squeeze it fully together, squeeze it fully together, and now you see a step down for a 3/5. Notice that it's parallel, parallel, and parallel. And if everything worked out great, you would place this back on the tabletop, and you would see that it is perfectly flat all the way around except that little area right there, which is in this plane of space up, And notice when you view it right from above, you can't see any of that bend because it was only made in the up and down plane of space. It restored the arch wire back to its natural contour and shape. In this plane of space, you can clearly see a 3/4 millimeter step up. All right, let's use a smaller intraoral finishing plier. Let's find a 1/2 millimeter, and this would be somewhat more appropriate perhaps in the cuspid area. So I'll put that plier right here, and what I see on that end right there is what I'm going to get on the wire. So I will fully squeeze once I'm perpendicular to a tangent on the curve, and then I can simply turn the plier over, go to the contralateral contact point, and squeeze again, and then I should have a 1/2 millimeter step bend. And you can see it's very gradual. It's very small, I should say, because this would be more appropriate between, say, a lower incisor and a lower bicuspid, a lower cuspid. And the rules for the use of these pliers, again, is on the POS website. Then let's talk about the intraoral use of this plier. So I've cut the distal ends off of here so that they were left slightly long intentionally, and this is necessary when we do the custom wire, because you will use up wire from the distal end right there. You will use up wire from the distal end, so you always leave it long. Incidentally, you should always have the middle mark in the middle, and then you will start your bends from the midline, working your way posteriorly, because again, you want to use up wire from the distal end, and you would like to preserve the middle in the middle. Those of you who are current POS students and past POS students, you know we have a strict protocol about bracket repositioning to minimize or possibly even eliminate the need for wire bending, but there's oftentimes the need for this due to anatomical differences in the teeth and bracket error. Despite your best efforts, upper and lower second bicuspids are always the hardest teeth to bracket because of their position and your visibility, so you expect to change some brackets and you expect to have some adjustment of the wire. So from an intraoral standpoint, this, excuse me, let me get my 1/2 millimeter plier back up here, make sure that that's what that is. And in this plane of space, you will be bending it up or down, and in this plane of space, you would be bending it in or out. To my knowledge, this is the only plier in the whole industry that will allow a true intraoral use because of the slenderness of those beaks to go between the brackets, even lower incisor brackets. It has the ability to go in here. So I don't want to knock the brackets off of my typodont, so I'm going to untie this wire so it's just sticking out a little bit, and we'll make a bend, let's say for my upper lateral incisor. Perhaps I want it to go up, and then let's use this upside down. So I want it to go up, and up would be now down into the tabletop toward me, and I'll get a bigger plier so it's easier to see. So between the central and the lateral, you can see that when I squeeze that handle, it's going to make this end go up. And notice that I'm right at the contact point of the teeth, I'm not butting it up against the lateral or the central. I'm right at the contact point, perpendicular to a tangent on the curve, and then you simply squeeze it fully together, and you can see that has made the mesial aspect of that lateral go up. And this is the beautiful thing. You simply turn the plier upside down, or turn it over, I should say. Make sure it's out of the bracket slightly, right at the contact point, perpendicular to a tangent on the curve, and squeeze fully. And there you get your beautiful step up. Let me get that moved over here a little bit. You get your beautiful step up of the lateral incisor. And I can see it better on mine. There we go. Step up of the lateral incisor, and you can see it here. When I put the wire back in there, it will have to be popped into the bracket. And again, I don't want to break the brackets off of this typodont. Notice too that the bend is not touching a bracket. You can see that angulation right here. Let's see if I can sharpen that up a little bit for us. And that's important because if a bend hits a bracket, then it may be difficult to tie in, or it may be arch bound, and then you would not be able to cause any change in the arch. So that would be a simple up or down bend. And these are very common to make in the posterior teeth, such as the second bicuspids. And again, because of bracket error. You will read about on the website that the 1/4 millimeter plier can be used anywhere. 1/4 mil, I think that's going to be too hard to see. Maybe not. Yeah, the 1/4 mil plier can be used between any lower incisors, and you can see how small it is, and this is to prevent it from knocking the brackets off. Of course, you can use a bigger plier, like a 1/2 millimeter plier, between the lower incisors. If you just pull the wire out of the bracket just a little bit, pretend with me this was a lower incisor, untie it and just pull it out of the brackets a tiny bit and do your squeeze, and then it will be safe. The 3/4 millimeter can be used between bicuspids and molars, and the 1 millimeter plier is used to reform a bend that's already been placed. So we don't normally use this 1 millimeter as the initial bend unless it's between two molars that are banded. I should mention to you that if you are doing that, you have to convert the molar first into a tube. Otherwise, if you make a bend with this in between, say, a 6 and a 7, you cannot remove the wire because it's in a tube. So you have to convert the tube first. Let's talk about that for a moment. Let's talk about reforming a bend. And I realize this is kind of going backwards, but that's all right. So I'll find my 1/2 millimeter step plier, my 1/2 millimeter step plier again, and I will make a bend on the wire by squeezing it fully. And now you see I have a small bend there. That's not very easy to see. Let's do a 3/4 bend on this side. So a 3/4 bend on this side, and you can see the distal aspect where my left thumb is. That's going to go up, right? It's going to go up. And the next month I see that, and I see, oh gee, that's not enough. So I want to reform it bigger. So I will put the plier, that is the 1 millimeter plier, on here, and I'm going to move it across this wire until I can feel it engage in there. And I'll go out from the other side. See how the beaks are open, and you slide along and you fall right into that. Now squeeze that again. Squeeze that again, and now you have a 1 millimeter step that used to be a 3/4. So this 1 millimeter is good for reforming a bend. Personally, I like to use 018 stainless steel for my wire bending efforts. The plier was designed to work on an 018 wire. It should not be used on anything bigger than that. It should never be used on rectangular steel wire like 19 by 25. It can be used on 1825 heat wire, and a lot of instructors will have you play with this during our wire bending exercise. The wire that you're supposed to use for finishing should be the same one that you had in the patient early on in treatment for torquing. The wire changes properties over the months of use, and it can be bent with an intraoral finishing plier if it is the used wire. So I'll show you that on here on this 18 by 25 wire, and I'll make a squeeze in the posterior segment nice and tight, and then it makes a pretty good bend, but you can see that that's not perfectly parallel with the other side, and that's because this plier really wasn't meant to be used on a wire that was this gauge. The problem is even worse if you try and bend it on the 25 side. So when I squeeze it on the 25 side, that's this thickness, then when I squeeze it, it doesn't come out very accurate as far as returning it back to the same plane or even the size of it. So again, this is one of the reasons I prefer to use 18 round wire for my finishing wires. So I hope this has been helpful for you, and like everything else, you'll only get this accomplished if you practice, practice, practice. And remember those basic wire bending skills, and we're going to re-emphasize those when we use a light wire plier in the next video that I plan on presenting. Doctors, I hope that's been helpful and informative, and good luck with that.